Hi, everyone. This is Mrs. J, and I'm doing a read aloud of The River Between Us by Richard Peck. And we're on to chapter 15 on page 149. Time and the Mississippi River. It was that summer of 1916 when my dad took me and my little brothers down to home to see his folks. Time has a different shape in Grand Tower, Illinois, so when we got there, Dad was young Bill and we were young Bill's boys. Summer afternoons are longer in southern Illinois than anywhere else and hotter. The sun hangs eternally just off of the blinding sky. Dad spent the afternoons mostly up in Great Aunt Delphine's room. He sat at her bedside by the window that looks out across the river to where the wedding party drowned all those years ago. As one afternoon folded into the next, I began to see this was another reason for our visit. His Aunt Delphine was dying. She would become another Grand Tower haunt, like the ghost woman with the flying hair who darted across the road and into the Mississippi, like that ghost who grieved the loss of a son, though he was still alive. My little brothers, Raymond and Earl, trailed Great Uncle Noah on all his afternoon chores. They'd never seen a one-armed man before, and this one could do what other people needed both hands for. He could peel an apple, kill a rat, bait a hook, all kinds of things that were deeply interesting to 5-year-old boys. They had no idea he was entertaining them. They thought he was just going about his business. The one of us who napped was old Dr. Hutchings. He sat in his porch rocker, transparent with age, courteous even in his drooping sleep. He had the dignity I saw in my dad. His clean white hands were folded neatly in his lap. These were the hands that had amputated Noah's arm in the first year of war, after the Battle of Belmont. And how many more arms and legs? How many thousands through all the blood-slick years of the war? I knew the story because Grandma Tilly told me. She was a talker when she got going, and she could bring it all back for you. I saw for myself the amputated arms sinking in the churning river as they brought the wounded back to Cairo. I still see it. Neither age nor weather slowed Grandma Tilly. She was a whirlwind from early morning on, cooking and baking for extra mouths. She was up and down the stairs, fetching and carrying for Aunt Delphine, and not letting anyone else do it. Carrying her slops, too, because there was no plumbing in the house. But she found a corner of every afternoon to round me up and lead me up the crest of the Devil's Backbone to a flat rock they called the Devil's Footstool, just among themselves. It had an aeroplane view out over the river and Tower Rock. There we sat, both of us barefoot, while she brought back the old times for me. She handed over the past like it was a parcel, seizing these days to do it. She couldn't sit there idle, of course. She didn't know how to be idle. She brought an old sewing basket with pearls and little shells on the lid and her mending. She darned over milk glass egg and spun out over her yarns. At first, I didn't know how to listen to the tales that old, but we began to edge across the years toward each other, Grandma Tilly and I began to see the yellow lamplight on their faces, just a flicker at first. I heard calliope music wavering over the water. At every turn the story took, I remember I was just about that age now that they were then, except for Cass. She was younger. What happened to Cass? She's down there. Grandma Tilly pointed a bent finger to a long dip between the backbone and the other outcropping called Oven Rock. It looked like an overgrown wilderness. It was a graveyard, but they didn't keep it up. By then, I knew how she worked to keep the sentiment out of her voice. Still, it was about to break through. She died young. She died the year after the war, 1866. She was 17. Dr. Hutchings called it diphtheria. She always spoke of him as Dr. Hutchings. She addressed him as Dr. Hutchings. If it hadn't been diphtheria, it would have been something else. I washed her poor bird body and dressed her in that sprigged dimity she wore that night to the showboat. I put her in the coffin and went and let nobody near her. I held her in my arms one last time, and then I let her go again. She gave up on life after Calinda left us. I waited for more and then said, "Why did Calinda leave?" Well, she was too dark to stay, wasn't she? She couldn't pass. I always thought she was the color of honey at the bottom of the jar, except she thought people would put 2 and 2 together, and it would give Delphine away. You know how there was always rumors about them. No, she had it in her mind to go out to California. She said that she'd be light enough there to pass as Spanish, and she was good with money. She had put some by for the journey. She was a true bird of passage, always ready to take flight. Grandma Tilly looked out over across the river to the west. A hard journey in them days, before there was a train to take you all the way to California. We knew she'd go. I was just scared Cass would go with her. I thought the trip might kill her. But of course, staying behind is what finally did her in. Calinda was what they called a conjure woman down yonder in New Orleans. She could tell you your fortune, and there had been a market for more of that in those built-up areas. Cass had the gift too. It's what drawed the two of them closer than sisters. But I suppose it was too late for Cass. I think she'd been worn out by her visions before Calinda come among us. A hot breeze stirred the trees. We never heard tell of Calinda again. I expect she prospered. She had all those talents, didn't she? But we never heard. They had a brother, too, remember, in Paris, France. But they were free people of color, and after the war, they just had to find new selves. I suppose it was just better to cut their ties and go it alone. Think of how many more there must have been like them, perched very quiet up on people's family trees, safe now from being called ugly names. That was the last afternoon of our visit. It had taken Grandma Tilly the week to tell her story. She bit off a thread. She didn't have all her teeth, not nearly. Then she stole another look where the graveyard had been, down where Cass was. "And your pa," I said. "He's down there?" "Yes, he's down there. We didn't bury Cass next to him. There wasn't any point to that. And of course, Mama's not there." Grandma Tilly turned away from me. Mama went in the river. It was time to leave them, and somehow I wasn't ready. We climbed up off of our rock, the Devil's Footstool, for the last time. Grandma Tilly had to look way up at me. I was getting to be what she called a big, tall galoot. We started down the backbone to the house. "They never did get married, you know," she said almost offhand. "You're old enough to hear it." "Who didn't?" "Delphine and Noah." "They never got married?" "But, oh, we put around that they were married. We said they went up to Centralia or somewhere to tie the knot. I forget now where we said they went, but they never did. It liked to break Noah's heart, but Delphine wouldn't have it. She said her kind didn't marry white men, and she was passing for white. She said it would betray all of her traditions, and her mother, her maman, would turn over in her grave. Her mother died during the war, when New Orleans was occupied by troops. We got that word. But anyway, Delphine would never marry Noah, though they're more married than most. But you know how she is. If she makes up her mind about something, or lapses into the French language, you just as well get out of her road. She'd make a mule look agreeable. I remember one more thing Grandma Tilly told me. She said that time was like the Mississippi River. It only flows in one direction. She meant you could never go back, but of course we had. She had taken me back. We went down to the house. She had a way of telling you so much you thought you'd heard it all, and I knew where she'd learned that from. The night before we left Grand Tower, Great Uncle Noah wrung off the neck off of a fat fryer to my little brother's great excitement. Grandma Tilly fried it in a batter for our picnic hamper. She loaded us with deviled eggs and buttermilk biscuits. She piled us high with jars of her rhubarb preserves and looked around and around herself to see what else we ought to have. We filled our bottles from their well. Dad personally filed down the points on the spark plugs, and we made an early start the next day. The three old folks were on the porch to see us go. We said our goodbyes to Great Aunt Delphine the night before, up in her cluttered room under a portrait of a yellow-haired father. She couldn't speak, but those great fringed violet eyes ate us alive. The touch of her little pillowed hand lingered on mine long after. We left in the cool of the morning, parked on the backbone, helped the Ford to get started better on a slant. I got the engine to catch after no more than 5 minutes. We settled, the little boys brown as berries now in the back seat. Then in this miraculous morning, Dad climbed up into the heaving car on the passenger's side. He was letting me drive. My heart sang. I was to drive and let out the brake and fiddle with the gas lever so that Dad could turn back and wave to them up on the porch. He waved until the house and the hill and the town swallowed up in our dust. We made good time getting home, keeping the river on our left, retracing our route, though we had more flats. Raymond and Earl wanted to stop the night and make our camp like we had before. They wanted this trip to have the exact same shape. Dad pretty well convinced them that we'd found our original campground when it was time to pull off that evening, though we never found a trace of the old campfire. We built another one and ate better that night than weenies on sticks. After the dust of the day, there were circles around our eyes where the goggles had been. The twins were nodding off against each other before the dying fire. I sat next to Dad on the running board. As if he'd waited for this moment, he said, "I've been thinking of getting into the war, if the country does." It shook me. Then I saw there was another reason for the trip. "You'll think I'm too old for a soldier," he said, "and maybe I am, but they'll need doctors. I didn't want to spring it on you last minute. You'd have to take over at home till I got back, be there for your mother and the boys." In the quiet, I heard my dad waiting. He wanted to be all right with me. He wanted my approval. Nothing this grown-up had happened to me before. This was something Grandma Tilly couldn't understand, how war promises a boy it can make a man out of him. "Well, your dad went to the war, didn't he?" I said. "Yes, he did." "They can't fight a war without a doc." "My father isn't Dr. Hutchings," Dad said. Noah's my father. I grabbed hold of the running board. The night revolved around me. And Delphine's my mother. She's slipping away, and I wanted this time with her. We couldn't be mother and son, you see. She didn't trust the world, didn't trust the town. She never knew when somebody would see her for who she was and turn on her. She wouldn't hand that on to me. I could have closed too many doors in my face. So I was named for Dr. William Hutchings. They had no other children, the doctor and your Grandma Tilly, none of their own. So I was their son too. As you said, I had 4 parents. He didn't mention love. It wasn't a word they used, but there was plenty they didn't mention. I'm proud of every drop of blood in me, my dad said, quiet to keep from waking the boys. One day, when you've had time to think it over, I hope you'll be proud too. I remembered Grandma Tilly speaking of the blood hurrying through her veins. Now I felt the blood hurry through mine, flowing like the Mississippi River, as my dad and I sat there on the running board under a sky crowded with stars. I didn't have to think it over. I was proud of anything that made me his son. I was proud to be Noah's grandson and Delphine's grandson. I was older now, too. A lot older than when this trip began. Older and looking ahead. One day I'd tell my son, of my own, this story of who we are, a son or a daughter with enormous violet eyes.